Good day, everyone. I am Hannah Nina Gabriela Paho. Before I will start my discussion, let's have a recap on what is scheduling. Scheduling refers to establishing the timing at which a human activity will take place or the time at which a facility or equipment can be used in an organization. The primary objective of scheduling is to trade off between two or more conflicting goals. These goals may include efficient utilization of facilities, equipment, and staff, and minimizing process time and customer waiting time. So, an example of scheduling is when you make a doctor's appointment. It is a plan for when things will occur or events will take place. By the way, it is continuation of April Paikan's report about scheduling. So, sequencing jobs through two work centers. At times, all jobs must be processed through the same two work centers sequentially. In operations research, Johnson's rule is a method of scheduling jobs in two work centers. So, what is Johnson rule? Johnson's rule is a technique that managers can use to minimize the make span for a group of jobs to be processed on two machines or at two successive work centers. This also minimizes the total idle time at the work centers. So, its primary objective is to find an optimal sequence of jobs to reduce make span. It also reduces the amount of idle time between the two work centers. For example, when you do laundry, clothes go through the washer before the dryer. Different kinds of clothing need different wash cycles and different drying times, but the sequence is the same. To shorten the time it takes to do your laundry, you can use Johnson's rule, a scheduling technique for developing a sequence when jobs are processed through two successive operations. The operations can be at machine centers, departments, or different geographical locations. The job flow must be n-directional. The first activity for every job is the same, and you must finish it before you can begin with the second activity. Like for example, wash the clothes before you dry the clothes. So Johnson's rule is an optimizing technique and always minimize make span. Application of Johnson's rule begins with a listing of all jobs to be scheduled and how much time will be required by each job at each workstation. The sequence is determined by the following steps. First, select the job with the shortest time. If the shortest time is at the first work center, schedule that job first. If the time is at the second work center, the job last. Second, eliminate the job and its time from further consideration. And last, repeat steps 1 and 2, working toward the center of the sequence until all jobs have been scheduled. And now let's proceed to the next topic, which is sequencing jobs when setup times are sequence dependent. On many machine tools, the setup times are sequence dependent. That is, the time to set up for the new part is dependent upon the part for which the machine is currently set up. In scheduling lots on the machine, the setup time is often a significant component of the total time required to complete each lot. The second machine setup times are independent of processing order, but in many instances that assumption is not true. Consequently, a manager may want to schedule jobs at a workstation taking those dependencies into account. The goal is to minimize total setup time. Next is, I think it is a common question na ma-encounter na to kung mag-tackle ta about scheduling, no? So, why scheduling can be difficult? Scheduling can be difficult for a number of reasons. One is that, in reality, an operation must deal with variability in setup times, processing times, interruptions, and changes in the set of jobs. Another major reason is that, except for small job sets, there is no method for identifying the optimal schedule, and it would be virtually impossible to sort through the vast number of possible alternatives to obtain the best schedule. As a result, scheduling is far from an exact science and, in many instances, is an ongoing task for a manager. Computer technology reduces the burden of scheduling and makes real-time scheduling possible. Probably the greatest obstacle to good scheduling is a concern about how a schedule will be perceived by the people who will do the work. The schedule shows the tradespeople how long it is expected they will take to do each job, and they may often, for good reason, disagree. So, kung naay problema, naa po na solusyon, no? So, there are a number of actions that managers can consider to minimize scheduling problems or difficulties. So, first is setting realistic due dates. Next is focusing on bottleneck operations. First, try to increase the capacity of the operations. If that is not possible or feasible, schedule the bottleneck operations first and then schedule the non-bottleneck operations around the bottleneck operations. And last is considering lot splitting for large jobs. This usually works best when there are relatively large differences in job times. Note that this doesn't apply to single unit jobs. Based on my research, software is the key to solving scheduling issues, such as manage time off, coordinate availability, organize shift trade requests, stay on budget, reduce absenteeism, minimize late arrivals, allow your employees to sign up for available shifts, consolidate and streamline internal communication. And now let's proceed to the theory of constraints. Dr. Elahoya Goldratt conceived the theory of constraints. The theory of constraints is a methodology for identifying the most important limiting factor that stands in the way of achieving a goal, and then systematically improving that constraint until it is no longer the limiting factor. It says that even if he or she makes the machines run faster, the worker is only capable of painting so fast. That means that in order to increase production output, more paint workers have to be added, or parts of the painting process need to be automated. In manufacturing, the constraint is often referred to as bottleneck. So, what is bottleneck operation? Bottleneck operation is a process or a step that limits an entire system's capacity to produce at its optimum level, that results in clogging productivity, produ- profitability, and growth. The simplest definition, a process bottleneck is a work stage that gets more work requests than it can process at its maximum throughout capacity. He also developed a system of varying batch sizes to achieve the greatest output of bottlenecks operations. He used the term process batch to denote the basic lot size for a job, and the term transfer batch to denote a portion of the basic lot that could be used during production to facilitate utilization of bottleneck operations. So process batch is the economical quantity to produce upon the activation of a given operation, while transfer batch is the quantity to be transported from one operation to another, assumed to be smaller than the first operation's process batch. Next, There is a five-step procedure to improve the performance of the bottleneck operations. First, determine what is constraining the operation. Second, exploit the constraint. For example, make sure the constraining resources is used to its maximum. Third, subordinate everything to the constraint. For example, focus on the constraint. Fourth, determine how to overcome the constraint. Fifth, and the last step is to repeat the process for the next highest constraint. Theory of constraints uses three metrics to assess the effectiveness of improvements. First is the throughput, the rate at which the system generates money through sales. For example, the contribution margin or sales revenue less variable cost, labor cost are considered to be part of operating expense. Next is inventory. Inventory represents money tied up in goods and materials used in a process. Last is operating expense. All the money the system spends to convert inventory into throughput. This includes utilities, scrap, depreciation, and so on. Next is scheduling services. Scheduling service systems present certain problems not generally encountered in manufacturing systems. This is due primarily to the inability to store or inventory services and the random nature of customer requests for service. In some situations, the second difficulty can be moderated by using appointment or reservation systems, but the inability to store services in most cases is a fact of life that managers must contend with. The approach used to schedule services generally depends on whether customers' contact is involved. Scheduling service is the utility which helps you to schedule jobs or tasks for execution at a future point of time. Scheduling in service systems may involve scheduling customers, the workforce, and equipment. Scheduling customers often takes the form of appointment systems or reservation systems. So, what is appointment systems? Appointment systems are intended to control the timing of customer arrivals in order to minimize customer waiting while achieving a high degree of capacity utilization. So, for example, a doctor can use an appointment system to schedule patients' office visits during the afternoon, leaving the mornings free for hospital duties. Similarly, an attorney can schedule client meetings around court appearances. On the other hand, reservation systems are designed to enable service system to formulate a fairly accurate estimate of the demand on the system for a given time period and to minimize customer disappointment generated by excessive waiting or inability to obtain service. So for example, reservation systems are widely used by resorts, hotels, and motels, restaurants, and some modes of transportation like airlines or car rentals. Now let's proceed to yield management. So what is yield management? It is the application of pricing strategies to allocate capacity among various categories of demand with the goal of maximizing the revenue generated by the fixed capacity. So for example, if your hotel has 100 rooms available with a full rate of $150 per room, the maximum potential revenue is $15,000. If on a particular night 70 rooms were sold at a lower average rate of $120, the achieved revenue is $8,400. Therefore, the yield percentage is 8,400 divided by 15,000 times 100 equals 56%. The basic yield management concept is applicable to railroads as well as airlines. Yield management is multidisciplinary because it blends elements of marketing, operations, and financial management. And that's all. That's the end of my report. And I hope that you learned something from it. And if you have questions or clarifications, just comment it in the chat box below. Thank you.